So we talked about the second treatise on civil government, and so this is kind of the politics, right? In terms of the Enlightenment and how the Enlightenment affected politics, and we'll talk a lot more about that later on. We talked about Locke's social contract, life, liberty, and property. Basically, you have the government, you have the people. And according to Hobbes, the government maintains law and order, and the people obey and are obedient to the government. And so this creates order out of chaos, according to Hobbes. Without this, it would just be, a little bit crazy out there. But what Locke said was that sure, the people should obey. Part of the social contract is that people are obedient. Um, but part of the responsibility of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. And if they don't, if the government does not, then it is the right of the people, right, to abolish the government and create a new government. So that gives you a little background on that. Now, in terms of psychology, Locke was very instrumental as well, and he wrote an essay called Essay on Human Understanding. And what he said basically was that everyone is born tabula rasa, or you could say this is a blank tablet, okay, or blank slate, and that our environment creates how we view the world and who we are. So our environment writes on this tablet, and then this becomes who we are. Okay, and so this kind of went against this Christian idea of original sin. Again, that kind of separates Enlightenment thinking from religious thinking. Okay. Well, economics is a major part of human affairs, and there was a guy by the name of Adam Smith who wrote The Wealth of Nations. It was actually a much longer title than that, but that's all you need to remember. And what he believed very strongly in was this idea of laissez-faire economics. And I don't know why I'm writing it again. I guess I just want to practice my handwriting. And so what this means, this is French for leave it alone. So if you leave, the best way for any nation to secure as much wealth as possible is for the nation to completely leave the economy alone. So there's a lot of people that still, believe very strongly in this. Now this kind of went against the predominant economic system at that time, which was mercantilism, in which the government was heavily involved, and we talked about that in a previous lecture. Now, Jeremy Bentham, all right, did a lot in terms of the law, and so what he saw was that a lot of these old laws that they had in England were just kind of crazy. For example, if you chopped down a tree, then that means you might have been put to death. Now that was some kind of crazy law that had probably been on the book since 1100 or something like that. And so what he said is, how when people make laws, how should they um, decide what what laws should be passed? And what he said is that they should take a utilitarian approach. This is utilitarianism. And I guess one way I could give you kind of the textbook definition, but I'm not. I'm just going to kind of throw it out to you like this. It's like the most good for the most people. The people that govern, when they decide on laws and they pass things, they should take this this is called a utilitarian approach. Um, an example of that is some people that look at the U.S.'s use of the atomic bomb, and there's a lot of debate on this. The debate surrounds the whether the Japanese were about to surrender or whether they would have, kept on fighting if the United States had invaded. Okay, and so if they had, if they were about to surrender, then some people say we should not have used the atomic bomb. But if they, uh, so in that case, we shouldn't have used the atomic bomb. Some people say that even if the Japanese, right, would have fought to the very end, if we had invaded Japan, right, in 1945, we still should not have used the atomic bomb because we were dropping these bombs on civilian populations, okay? And that ushered in, the atomic age and all of that. Well, the decision, though, assuming that the Japanese were not going to surrender, the decision to use the atomic bomb was a utilitarian decision, because what they said was that more people would have died, millions of people would have died if the United States had invaded mainland Japan. But by using the atomic bomb, even though hundreds of thousands of people died, fewer people died as a result of that. That's a utilitarian approach. So this is a big part of the Enlightenment. Now, what you want to remember about all of these, okay, even going back to Hobbes, Locke, all right, this idea of life, liberty, and property, tabula rasa, the wealth of nations. For example, this is where you get the law of supply and demand. That's very, you see that a lot in the Enlightenment, the law of something, okay? Because it kind of comes from this, kind of a scientific, scientific method, scientific view of the world, this idea that, these laws of nature can be discoverable by human beings, and then we can apply them to human affairs. Things like economics. Okay? So just like you have the law of gravity, all right? Well, then you also have the law of supply and demand. Okay? Utilitarianism. All these things are based on reason, not tradition, not faith, not just belief, okay, but actual logical inquiry, logical thinking. Now, one of the most famous Enlightenment thinkers was a guy from France. And he is known as Voltaire. His real name was Francois Marie Aurier. All right, but you don't have to remember that. He was a lot of people talk about how short he was. He was 5'3", which back then actually wasn't that short, but he certainly was a giant in the literary world. And he wrote Candide. Should actually be underlined. It shouldn't be in quotes. All right, because it's a book. And he wrote a lot of other things. Okay. But Candide, which was written in the 1750s, I think 1759 to be exact, was a satire in which he attacked war. For example, he said, "Everywhere murderers are punished unless they kill in large numbers and to the sound of drums." And he attacked the Catholic Church. He said, "Écrasez la fin," which meant crush the infamous thing. And he attacked censorship. Now, he didn't say this, but this came out of the Enlightenment when he said, "Though I disagree with what you say, I will defend to my death your right to say it." I don't think Voltaire said that, although he's often attributed um, that quote. Maybe it may have been Denis Diderot, who said it. I'm not really sure, but that was definitely part of that kind of Enlightenment. It's like, I may disagree with what you say, okay, but I will defend to my death your right to say it. And that's hard sometimes, but that's very important. You think about how important that is in our society today, and how vitriol, some of the debates get. All right, but yet still we have to have that right to say these things. Um, the encyclopedist, the most famous was Diderot, and like I said, I believe it was he that made um, that stated that, though I disagree with you, I will defend to my death your right to say it. Either way, it was either him or Voltaire. It doesn't matter. Like I said, that kind of because, like I said, Voltaire often gets the credit for that, but it really captures the spirit of the Enlightenment. So basically, what Diderot and others did, mainly Diderot, what he did was he got experts on all kinds of different fields, and then he compiled their writings into an encyclopedia. And in the encyclopedia, he also attacked a lot of the institutions. And that's something else that you see in the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment age is that these guys attacked institutions. Oh, shoot. Of their day. Okay, so we're talking about whether it was the government, whether it was religious institutions, and of course in France it was the Catholic Church, and so he attacked the Catholic Church, and even Christianity. He cross-referenced Christianity with cannibalism, for example, because of Jesus' phrase, "Eat my body, drink my blood." Diderot himself wrote this. This is kind of a famous quote. He said, "Man will not be free until the last king has been strangled with the entrails of the last priest." Now, listen to that again. I guess you could go back and rewind it here, but I'll just repeat it again. Man will not be free until the last king has been strangled by the entrails of the last priest. Now, another French Enlightenment thinker was a guy by the name of Baron Montesquieu, and he wrote L'Esprit de Loi, or the Spirit of the Laws. And basically what he said was that it was not good to have all power concentrated in one area. Say, for example, a king. That basically, you had to kind of spread power around. Okay, you had to spread it out. And he was the first person that advanced the theory of the separation of powers. And what this means is that it's best, all right, to have an executive branch, me, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. And of course, we have that today. And obviously, the founding fathers of the United States were influenced by this. And so that concludes the lecture on the Enlightenment. And make sure that you study this and you read in your textbook any information that deals with the Enlightenment.